For nearly 40 years, the brutal slaying of 24-year-old Terry Dollowy cast a dark shadow over Wisconsin. In February 1985, Terry mysteriously vanished from her home, and just days later, her decapitated, burning body was discovered in a rural culvert. Despite exhaustive efforts, the perpetrator remained elusive, and as the years passed, many believed the case would forever remain unsolved. But after decades of ends, a shocking arrest and newly uncovered DNA evidence have reignited hope, and the long-dormant case may finally see justice served. Terry Dollowy was originally from River Forest, Illinois, a suburban area near Chicago. Raised in a middle-class family, she was known to be a dedicated student and a hard worker, balancing her academic life with her job as a bar manager. At the time of the tragedy, Terry was a senior at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, studying finance. She had moved to La Crosse to pursue her education, and her ambitions reflected her drive to create a stable and successful life. Terry's work at Piggy's, an upscale restaurant in the heart of La Crosse, allowed her to support herself while attending school. Terry shared a trailer home with her fiancé, Russell Lee, in the small community of Berry Mills. The couple seemed to be leading a stable life together, and Terry was looking forward to graduating and starting her career. She had a small white poodle named Susie, whom she loved dearly. On February 14, 1985, Terry finished her shift at Piggy's. It was a cold winter evening when she returned to the trailer home. Her purse, car, and all her personal belongings were left behind, but Terry and her Susie vanished without a trace. The following days brought mounting fear and confusion. Terry's fiancé reported her missing, but there were no immediate clues. Then, 4 days later, on a remote road in Vernon County, a grisly discovery was made. A passerby reported a fire in a culvert, where the police soon found Terry's decapitated and burned body. The investigation into Terry's slaying was extensive, but despite early efforts, it was marked by frustration and ends. Hundreds of people were interviewed and potential leads were followed, but nothing concrete emerged. One of the initial focuses was Terry's personal life. The investigators looked into her fiancé, Russell, who had been the last person to see her alive. His gambling habits and close association with pool tournaments raised suspicions. But despite the scrutiny, there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. The investigation expanded to include other people in her social circle, including friends and co-workers, but none of these avenues produced a suspect. Adding to the challenge for investigators was that Terry's head and her missing dog were never found, leaving investigators without critical evidence that could have shed light on how and why she met such a tragic fate. Then, in a frustrating turn, the case began to grow cold. With no DNA technology at the time, and only circumstantial evidence to go on, law enforcement had little to work with. They believed the perpetrator had meticulously planned the crime, using an accelerant to burn her body and destroy potential evidence. Still, authorities never gave up. Over the years, the investigators periodically revisited the case, re-interviewing witnesses and re-examining the evidence. In the late 1990s, a paint chip was discovered on a sheet that had been wrapped around Terry's body, hinting at a possible vehicle used in the crime. But again, it was not enough to lead to an arrest. The investigators continued to carry the torch, hoping that one day, new technology or a fresh lead would finally bring answers to this case. That day arrived in 2023, when advances in DNA technology cracked open the mystery and pointed to a suspect who had been hiding in plain sight. The breakthrough in Terry Dollowy's case was set in motion by a series of advancements in forensic science, specifically DNA technology, which had evolved significantly. The investigators made a crucial decision to revisit old evidence, hoping that new methods could yield results that had been impossible decades earlier. The authorities obtained a search warrant to collect DNA from Michael Raymond Popp, a truck driver from Tomah, Wisconsin, who had long flown under the radar in the investigation. Though Popp had been interviewed back in 1985, he was never considered a serious suspect at the time, as he described his connection to Terry as merely a casual acquaintance. But this new push in the investigation brought Popp back into focus. A DNA swab taken from Pop in January 2023 was sent to a forensic lab for comparison. The results were shocking. Pop's DNA matched the samples collected from Terry's autopsy. This was the first solid evidence linking Pop to the crime. During interviews with the investigators, Pop initially claimed he had only seen Terry a few times and did not really know her that well. But when asked why his DNA matched the male DNA found inside Terry's body, Pop responded, I maybe had a little affair with her for 6 to 8 months. When the investigators pressed him on why he had never mentioned this before, Pop explained, "Well, it is a pretty serious case there. Did not want to be associated with it." Though Pop maintained his innocence, saying he was not a violent person, the match provided the investigators with the concrete evidence they needed to arrest him on September 24, 2024. At a bond hearing in Vernon County Circuit Court, Special Prosecutor Kevin Croninger requested a $2 million cash bond. Judge Timothy Gaskell set the bond at $1 million. Pop, who was not represented by an attorney at the time, attempted to engage Prosecutor Croninger in a discussion about an unrelated case in Monroe County. In that case, he faces charges of stalking, threats, resisting arrest, and illegal substance possession. At one point, Pop expressed his disbelief, stating he was flabbergasted as to why he was in court or in custody for the slaying charge. If convicted of Terry's case, Pop faces the possibility of life in prison. For nearly 4 decades, Terry's family and the community were left with unanswered questions. With modern DNA technology linking Pop to the crime, there is hope that the long-awaited answers will finally come to light. Though Pop denies responsibility, the upcoming legal proceedings may at last bring closure to those who have spent years seeking justice for Terry Dollowy. A woman and mother who had moved to Las Vegas Valley, Nevada, with her boyfriend in the spring of 1994, went missing on the night of August 26th. She was found deceased the next day. The person responsible for her demise remained unknown for nearly 30 years. On August 27, 1994, 2 men were hiking when they discovered the remains of an unidentified individual on Lake Mead Boulevard near the entrance to the Lake Mead Recreation Area. It was determined that the remains were that of a white female. Her body had been dragged and was placed in a washed area. After an autopsy done the following day, the Clark County Coroner's Office determined that the remains were that of 27-year-old Melanie White. The police believed that she was dragged from a car into the washed area, strangled and slain by blunt force trauma. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department led the investigation, and many leads were received and tracked. Unfortunately, none were successful in identifying the person responsible for Melanie's demise, and the case went cold. In 2010, the department's cold case detectives reviewed the case and submitted evidence from the crime scene for traditional DNA testing. A STR profile was developed for an unknown male suspect. The profile was uploaded to CODIS, but there was no match to a known individual. In 2021, using funding provided by Vegas Justice League, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department submitted evidence to Othram. They hoped to determine if advanced DNA testing could finally identify the person responsible for taking the life of Melanie. Using forensic-grade genome sequencing, Othram scientists developed a DNA profile for the unknown male suspect. This profile was used in a genealogical search by Othram's forensic genetic genealogy team to develop new leads in the case. These leads were returned to the detectives with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and a follow-up investigation was conducted. This follow-up investigation led to the identification of potential relatives of the suspect. On October 22, 2024, comparison DNA tests were conducted, leading to the positive identification of the suspect as Arthur Lavery, who was born September 7, 1955. Lavery grew up in the Las Vegas area. He was 38 years old when he ended Melanie's life. Lavery passed away in May 2021 due to COVID-19 complications. Lavery was previously arrested in the Las Vegas area for battery. During a press event, Melanie's younger brothers Walter and Jason White spoke about their late sister. They said, "We will always miss Melanie and believe that the solving of her case will help bring a measure of peace to her and all of us." Jason and Walter say many members of their family were broken as they mourned the loss of Melanie. They have found closure with this news. Walter said that she was a very nice person and that her demise was a tragic loss. Jason also said that they loved her very much. Melanie's son that she had at the time of her slaying is 33 years old. For 2 decades in Flint, Michigan, the unsolved case of Shannon Holihan lay dormant. His body was discovered in a parking lot, partially clothed and bearing the marks of a brutal attack, while his cherished 1994 Chevrolet Corvette vanished without a trace. Years turned into decades, and all the leads had gone cold. But then, in a twist of fate, the breakthrough came, and DNA evidence finally linked a suspect to the crime. Shannon Daniel Holihan was born and raised in Grand Blanc, Michigan, where he developed a reputation as a bright and caring individual. He attended local schools and excelled academically, ultimately pursuing a degree in computer programming. By the time he was in his early 30s, Shannon had established a successful career at Kmart Corporation's headquarters in Troy. Outside of work, Shannon was a devoted son, caring for his mother, who was a stroke survivor. Shannon was also a member of the LGBTQ community, and during the late 1990s, he frequented local bars, including the State Bar and Club Triangle in Flint. These venues were popular gathering spots for the community, offering a sense of camaraderie and acceptance. No one could have imagined that a casual evening out would take a dark turn, setting in motion a series of events. On the evening of May 26, 1998, Shannon was last seen leaving his workplace, likely feeling the excitement of a night out ahead. He had plans to visit the State Bar, a popular bar on Dort Highway in Flint, known for its social scene. Witnesses reported seeing him at the bar earlier that night, where he mingled with friends and enjoyed the company of other patrons. As the night went on, Shannon's presence was noted by several acquaintances, and he seemed to be in good spirits. But as the hours passed, concerns began to arise when he failed to return home. His mother, who relied on his support, became increasingly worried when he did not check in with her. The following morning, on May 27th, at around 8:30 a.m., a restaurant owner discovered Shannon's unconscious body in an alley behind the Empress of China restaurant located near the bar. He was found partially clothed, wearing only a t-shirt, and had sustained severe blunt force trauma to the back of his head, indicating a violent attack. The investigators later pieced together that Shannon had likely encountered his attacker after leaving the bar. Eyewitness accounts suggested that he had spoken to a young man on a mountain bike shortly before disappearing. Despite immediate efforts to locate his missing 1994 Chevrolet Corvette, which was found stolen, leads quickly ran dry. Shannon was taken to Hurley Medical Center, where he remained in a coma for 2 days before succumbing to his injuries on May 30th. His demise would be the beginning of a lengthy, unsolved case. The breakthrough in the investigation of Shannon Holihan's case finally came in 2024, more than 25 years after the crime. The Flint Police Department's Cold Case Unit, established with funding from the American Rescue Plan Act and the Mott Foundation, had been actively reviewing unsolved cases, and Shannon's was among them. In a fortunate turn of events, the detectives re-examined existing evidence, particularly the DNA samples collected from under Shannon's fingernails. This evidence had been preserved since the initial investigation and had remained a potential link to his attacker. The Michigan State Police Crime Lab, utilizing advanced forensic techniques that had developed significantly over the years, conducted a new analysis of the samples. As the lab worked through its backlog of cases, it ultimately found a match. The DNA belonged to Eric Dukes, a 53-year-old man who had recently been arrested for an unrelated crime. This match was crucial as it suggested that Shannon had struggled with his attacker and the DNA under his nails indicated a defensive action, likely taken during the violent encounter. Upon confirming the DNA match, the detectives revisited the circumstances surrounding the night of the tragedy. They investigated Duke's background and any connections he might have had to Shannon or the locations he frequented. They also began to piece together a timeline that connected Dukes to Shannon's last known whereabouts. The cold case unit's findings prompted them to seek additional information. A tip from Crime Stoppers, unrelated to Shannon's case, led to further evidence tying Dukes to the crime. As they gathered more details, the investigators found witness accounts suggesting that Dukes and Shannon had interacted that night, painting a clearer picture of the events leading up to the crime. With this evidence, Genesee County Prosecutor David Layton announced charges against Dukes for felony related to Shannon's slaying and carjacking. The ability to finally charge a suspect was not only a victory for the cold case unit, but also a significant moment for Shannon Holihan's family and friends, who had long sought justice for his tragic demise. In the heart of Raleigh, North Carolina, a dark chapter from nearly 3 decades ago has resurfaced, reigniting the pursuit of justice for a victim long believed to be forgotten. A man was arrested and charged in connection with a brutal assault that took place in 1998. It is an arrest that is a perfect example of how advancements in forensic science are bringing long cold cases back to life, decades after they have occurred. In the late hours of that fateful day in 1998, a woman's life was forever altered. While the specific details of the assault remain a mystery to protect the identity of the victim, it is known that the incident was violent and horrific. The victim reported being kidnapped and assaulted. Despite her courage in coming forward, the investigation into the crime yielded little progress. The case eventually went cold, becoming just another statistic in a long list of unsolved assaults. Years later, hope reemerged through the Assault Kit initiative launched by the North Carolina Department of Justice, which aims at addressing the backlog of untested assault kits across the state. As part of this initiative, the evidence from the 1998 case was re-examined, leading to a significant breakthrough. A DNA sample collected at the crime scene was entered into CODIS. In October 2024, in a remarkable turn of events, a positive match was found. David Lee Toney's DNA profile was linked to the evidence gathered from the crime scene. This connection breathed new life into the investigation, prompting law enforcement to act swiftly. With the arrest of Toney, the Raleigh Police Department hopes to provide the victim with the justice she has long awaited. Toney faces serious felony charges, including first-degree assault, attempted first-degree offense, kidnapping, and assault inflicting serious bodily injury. For over 3 decades, the brutal slaying of 69-year-old Stella McCrary remained one of Mobile, Alabama's most haunting unsolved crimes. Her life, once filled with quiet peacefulness, ended violently one cold January morning in 1988. The search for answers would stretch across years. Stella McCrary lived a peaceful life on Burton Avenue in Mobile. Known for her kindness and strong-willed nature, she had built a small, content world for herself. On January 23, 1988, Stella was found lifeless in her home. Her son Tommy made the gruesome discovery. Stella had been stabbed multiple times, and there were signs that robbery might have been the motive. But despite the urgency of the investigation, no arrest was made, and the case grew cold. Mobile police began looking into potential suspects, but the investigation ultimately stalled. In the years following the crime, the investigation seemed to lose momentum. The case was revisited periodically, but the breakthrough that everyone had hoped for never materialized. That was until March 2021, when Mobile police cold case detectives took a fresh look at the evidence. With new technology and renewed determination, they began to reassemble the puzzle pieces, looking deeper into old evidence and fresh leads. It was not until the detectives revisited the case that they began to connect the dots. Among the names that resurfaced was Anthony Hayes, a man who had long been a suspect, but whose connection to the crime had never been definitively proven. As the investigation advanced, new evidence, including DNA links, confirmed Hayes' involvement. He was arrested in Arizona in early August 2024 and is awaiting extradition to Alabama. With Hayes in custody, the mystery of Stella's slaying is finally solved. After more than 30 years, the McCrary family is one step closer to closure. The case serves as a reminder that even the longest of cold cases can eventually be solved, and that no matter how much time passes, justice can still catch up to those who thought they had escaped it. In Ayodhya, India, a brutal 17-year-old case has resurfaced, rekindling memories of a tragedy that shattered a family and eluded justice for over a decade. A young man, Mahavir Singh, was slain in the quiet village of Tulsipur Maya. But with the passage of time, hope dwindled and the case seemed to slip by, completely forgotten. Until the recent arrests of two fugitives brings renewed hope that the case will be solved at last. Mahavir Singh was a beloved son and a vibrant member of the Tulsipur Maya community. But in 2007, his life was abruptly cut short after a brutal act of gunfire took his life. The investigation into the demise of Mahavir began immediately after the shocking incident. With the community reeling from the tragedy, the Gonda police faced the daunting task of piecing together evidence while grappling with the emotional weight of the case. Initial inquiries led them to identify two primary suspects, Govind alias Sanjay and Sitaram Das. Both men were well known in their respective regions. Govind from Lakhisarai district in Bihar, and Das from Hanuman Kuti Ramgat in Ayodhya. But despite efforts to apprehend the suspects, both managed to evade capture, prompting law enforcement to intensify their investigation. The police employed various tactics, including interviewing witnesses and examining the crime scene for clues. But as the days turned into weeks and then months, leads became scarce and the trail grew cold. In a bid to revitalize the case and encourage community involvement, the Gonda police announced a reward of 15,000 rupees for information leading to the arrest of the fugitives. This move aimed to galvanize locals, urging them to come forward with any tips or insights that could aid in locating Govind and Das. The reward not only served as an incentive, but also emphasized the police's commitment to seeking justice for Mahavir's family. Even with the promise of financial incentive, it became evident that the suspects had successfully gone underground, further frustrating the investigators. In the aftermath, Mahavir's family bravely took a stand, filing a case against Govind and Das. As the years passed, the police seized properties and submitted charge sheets while the perpetrators continued to roam free. Years of relentless searching culminated in a breakthrough in October 2024. After efforts by the Gonda police and the collaborative support of the Ayodhya police, the authorities received actionable intelligence that led them closer to the whereabouts of the accused. Acting on the arrest warrants issued by the Civil Judge Senior Division ACJM, in Gonda, the Ram Janmabhoomi police sprang into action. The police first focused their attention on Sitaram Das. Following leads, they conducted a search operation near the Hanuman Kuti temple. In the late afternoon, they positioned themselves strategically behind the temple, monitoring the area for suspicious activity. The effort paid off when the officers spotted a man fitting Das's description. His demeanor and movements raised suspicions among the team. The officers approached cautiously and confirmed his identity as Das alias Vijay Chella Ramcharan Das. He was arrested without incident, and the police recovered documents related to the violent crime from his immediate vicinity, solidifying the evidence against him. The search for Govind alias Sanjay continued. Utilizing information gathered during the initial arrest, the police traced Govind to Laxman Kila, a well-known landmark in Ayodhya. The officers swarmed the area, determined to apprehend the second suspect. In a well-coordinated effort, they located Sanjay, who was attempting to blend into the crowd. Realizing he was surrounded, he attempted to flee, but the police quickly apprehended him, securing the arrest with minimal disturbance. Both arrests were a victory for law enforcement and brought closure to a case that had stayed hidden in the shadows for nearly 2 decades. The police expressed their relief at finally being able to serve justice to Mahavir Singh's family, whose anguish had been compounded by the long wait for accountability. The recovery of key documents at the residences of the accused added weight to the prosecution's case, ensuring that both men would face trial for their alleged roles in the crime. As the news of the arrest spread, the community of Gonda breathed a sigh of relief, hopeful that this long-awaited chapter would soon reach its end in a court of law.